Maybe I'm kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm just stubborn. Maybe I'm anti-establishment, don't like following the crowd. I don't know, but 3 years ago, I actually stopped making any New Year's resolutions. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves often because we want to come up with something good. We imagine amazing things for us in the future and set high expectations, which more often than not, if statistics are true, at least 80% of us fail in our New Year's resolutions. Hey guys, my name is Mike Hatch. Thank you for watching Hatchtags, really a channel where I challenge myself and hopefully encourage other men who are in the same boat as I am to walk in the light as He is in the light, as in God, in order to be a light for the glory of God. So that's my goal on this channel. So I invite you to come along with me on the journey. And just so happens now I'm at my house and we have gotten pretty close to putting away our Christmas decorations. You see some of the bins in the background. Our Christmas tree is down now. Just have a few decorations left up. But of course, now is the time where everybody is thinking about New Year's resolutions. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves often because we want to come up with something good. We imagine amazing things for us in the future and set high expectations, which more often than not, if statistics are true, at least 80% of us fail in our New Year's resolutions. Now, maybe I'm kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm just stubborn. Maybe I'm anti-establishment, don't like following the crowd. I don't know, but 3 years ago, I actually stopped making any New Year's resolutions. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have goals and aspirations for every year. I just switched my new year to be my birthday. For me, it's just more motivating to come up with, to kind of look back at the year that I just had and kind of take inventory and look ahead. It just makes more sense in my mind and my heart that it's my birthday, because technically that's a more accurate count of how many times I've gone around the sun, if you will, alive. So I use my birthday. So maybe for you, making New Year's resolutions, the best way to keep them is not to make them anymore. That's what I did. So I started making them on my birthday. So hey, I'm not gonna change anybody's minds. I know that. Advertisers would not make any money. They need everybody at the same time, on the same date. Now, in spite of the fact that I am anti-New Year resolution guy now, as God would have it, I happened to see a movie on New Year's Eve that absolutely created a huge paradigm shift for me in my mind and helped me to think differently and challenge my attitude and my emphasis in terms of my own resolutions and goals that I have for my life. Because often our goals and our resolutions revolve around, especially for us as men, revolve around our ego. You know, we talk a lot about self-improvement, obviously, and ways that we can better ourselves, whether it be physically or mentally or professionally in certain ways. And often as I think about my own personal resolutions, they're too self-centered and too selfish in some ways. And this movie really helped me to shift my mindset. The movie that I saw is called A Hidden Life, and it's a true story about a guy named Franz Jägerstätter, I think I got that name right, who was a conscientious objector to World War II. He was an Austrian peasant farmer who was called up to serve the Nazis. He conscientiously objected to that and refused to take the Hitler vow. And the whole movie is just incredible about his story of suffering. And not only his story, but the story of his family. He had a wife and 3 kids, and their story of suffering through this whole experience. He was imprisoned, he was tortured, he was beaten, and eventually beheaded. Now, there were 2 things that stuck out to me in terms of the meaning of hidden, coming from the title of the movie, Hidden Life. And the first thing was that Franz himself was, in a sense, hidden, being kind of an obscure, no-name peasant farmer who really nobody knew about. He was a hidden life, in a sense. The second thing was that throughout the movie, the Nazi interrogators who would interview Franz and try to talk him out of sacrificing himself, basically, they would tell him over and over again, look, you're nobody. Nobody even knows you're in this prison. Maybe your family, maybe the little tiny town you came from, but you're not gonna make any difference. You're not gonna make any difference in the war effort. You're not gonna make any difference in what happens with Hitler and the Nazis. And so in that sense, he was a hidden life and that nobody would know about him really. So why make such a sacrifice? Now the movie is based on George Eliot's book Middlemarch, and the title of the movie, Hidden Life, was taken from a quote that George Eliot had from that book. And the quote goes like this. It says, "Those who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs are the ones who make our lives better now, are the ones who change the world, even though at the time it looked so insignificant and they were hidden in a sense and nobody knew about them." Now this of course got me thinking about us as men and how much we emphasize self-promotion and self-branding and this idea of like, look at me, I'm the expert, and there's nothing wrong in and of itself, but the question is, where are our motives behind all of that? And there are a couple lessons that I learned I just wanted to point out to you from the movie that I think might help us as we think about, or maybe you're thinking about your New Year's resolutions. The first thing is that there was often a scene that had a rushing river in it, and this river was in the little town that Franz lived in. And it was shot in such a way that made it look like this really powerful rushing river that was unstoppable. In a sense, it was overwhelming. It was relentless, a relentless current. And it kind of symbolized for me in the movie the relentless current, if you will, of evil and sin in the world that really just overtakes everything that gets in its way or tries to stand up to it or stand against it. And so I think of Star Trek with the Borg and the whole quote, "Resistance is futile." That's exactly what I think about, that Franz was this hidden life that was equivalent in, especially to the Nazis, as this pebble that was being thrown into this rushing river in an attempt to dam the river. Clearly, it wouldn't work, and that's the way they viewed Franz. And I think often we think of ourselves in a very similar way, that we want to make a difference in this world, but it feels like we're like a pebble being thrown into a rushing river, trying to dam the river or stand up to evil in some sense, or sin, or against something we really believe in, and it feels like we make no difference whatsoever. In Franz's case, it seemed as if his sacrifice was meaningless. The other lesson I took from the movie was during a conversation between Franz and a painter who was painting the church. He'd paint on the ceiling, on the walls. He would paint pictures of Jesus and the disciples and scenes from the Bible, for example. And he talks about this idea of painting very nice, sanitized, kind of acceptable pictures of Jesus with a pretty halo over his head. And he wished that he could paint real pictures of Jesus, of maybe being beaten or tortured, or what he looked like on the cross in actuality, which not many people would want to even look at. But he wished he could present a more realistic representation of who Jesus was. And he said this really interesting thing to Franz as Franz is trying to think through whether he stands up to the Nazis or not. He says, it's as if we're looking, as I paint these pictures and we're drawing people to churches, as if we're looking for admirers of Jesus and not followers of Jesus. And the message that he was sending, insinuating to Franz was, hey, you've got an opportunity to really live out your faith in a real way, to be a true follower of Jesus and to suffer in the way that Jesus suffered, seemingly hidden, obscure. Now, from a kingdom of God perspective, guys, things look really different. There's a whole different reality to what's going on. There was a whole different reality with what was going on with Franz, and there's a whole different reality than what's going on with us. That rushing river analogy is what it feels like, but from a kingdom perspective, it's not the reality of what's actually happening, because God, through his kingdom, is actually actively subverting evil in this world through his redemptive purposes. You see, God works most powerfully through that hidden life, through that seemingly insignificant, the despised things of this world, the weak and revolting things of this world, not in the praise and adoration of this world. So if we're thinking about our lives and our futures and setting resolutions and trying to think about what we want to do and what we want to stand for, is it for the adoration and the approval and the pleasing of others and gaining that approval? Or is it God's approval and playing into his plan, which might end up looking different and not like our culture's definition of success? So for me personally, this movie just reminded me, it's not about me. So as I think about my own resolutions, the ones that I made back at my birthday and have been living out through this 40th year of my life, I'm trying to include now what I've gained from this movie, more of a submissive attitude toward God's redemptive purposes. And less about me and less about the stroking of my ego in a sense, but instead lending myself to God's will, not my will, but what is God doing and how can I lend myself to His purposes and His will? Even if, from a culture's perspective, it might look crazy. So, as you think about your New Year's resolutions, maybe think, what are your motives behind them? Are they to please God? Are they to fit into His will and His purposes of redemption? Or are they more for your own ego? Are they more for your own purposes, your own agenda? Just something to think about as you are beginning this journey in 2020 with your New Year's resolutions. Again, we're just trying to walk in the light as He is in the light in order to be a light for the glory of God. So until next time, let's continue to live empowered by the light.